Okay, my clock just clicked to 10:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kurt Johnson with the Climate Center. I'm pleased to welcome you to our webinar this morning on how EVs and solar can cut costs and boost energy resilience. Couple commercial announcements. Thank you to our sponsors that make our work here at the Climate Center on webinars possible: Bay Area Air District, Peninsula Clean Energy, River City Bank, MCE, and Sunrun. We also have a number of promotional partners that help get the word out about our webinars here at the Climate Center, and they are listed here. We appreciate their support for getting information out about what we're working on. Um, if you would like to be a promotional partner for a Climate Center webinar, we'd love to hear from you. So get in touch, and we'd like to add you to this list of promotional partners for Climate Center webinars. Jumping right in, here's a quick overview of what we're doing this morning. Like I said, I'm your moderator, Kurt Johnson with the Climate Center, and then we're going to go ahead and roll into presentations from our four different speakers as noted here. We'll start with Peter Chen from the California Energy Commission. We'll roll over to Annabella Korbatoff from Nuvi Fermata, get to Alex from Kia, and then finally end with Linda from Grid Alternatives. And then we'll have about 10 minutes left for Q&A at the end. Speaking of Q&A, I should add that instead of using the chat for Q&A, we'll be using the Q&A button on Zoom. So if you have questions that come up over the course of the morning, please go ahead and pop them in to the Q&A, and we will address them as best as we can. A couple other introductory context remarks I'd like to make to start off with. So here at the Climate Center, our community energy resilience program is working on what we call the grid for the future. And this is a diagram that we produced here at the Climate Center a couple years ago. And it is kind of a vision, schematic of what we'd like to see in the future as we have more climate extreme fueled weather events knocking out the power. It's going to be really important that we have a much more distributed and decentralized electricity system. Obviously, the most resilient and reliable power source for your home is the one that's nearest to you, and that may include the electric vehicle sitting in your driveway. And so the vision is to get to a world where a small percentage of electricity is generated locally, and most of it's coming in from an external power plant to a world where there's much, much higher percentage of things noted here, rooftop solar everywhere, bidirectional electric vehicles, uh, all the other stationary battery storage, which is located on the distribution grid, which is much more resilient in the face of power outages, which are going to become more frequent. The foundational asset for building this vision for the grid for the future are electric vehicles. So I think people are probably familiar with rooftop solar. It's shown here. We have over a couple million solar roofs in California, which is fantastic. Some people know that. What people probably don't know is that we also have a vast, currently untapped asset of electric vehicles in California. Governor Newsom sent out a press release recently talking about how California had surpassed 2.5 million EVs on the road in California. The battery storage and capacity is a gigantic, currently untapped asset, which we're trying to take better advantage of. Related to that, this chart on the right is from a California Energy Commission report that came out just a few weeks ago, and Peter from the CEC is going to be talking about that in a minute for a couple minutes. But here's sort of the key number to note. The red line is saying that we have currently of those 2.5 million EVs a potential capacity of 18.5 gigawatts. Just to kind of put the significance of that number into context, the highest ever level recorded energy use in California was a couple of years ago when we hit a system peak of 52 gigawatts. The largest single power plant in California is Diablo Canyon Nuclear Generating Station that has a capacity of slightly over 2 gigawatts. So put another way, the EVs that are currently on the road today in California if added together, have a potential capacity which is roughly 8 times the size of California's largest power plant. So there's a huge opportunity to better harness these existing assets to take advantage of their ability to sort of create a more affordable, reliable, and resilient grid. In order to seize that opportunity, here at the Climate Center, we've been working with Senator Josh Becker on a bill recently introduced called SB 1282, Battery Integration and Grid Reliability Act, the goal of which is to enact policy to increase the likelihood that California does, in fact, seize that opportunity. The bill is going to be heard before the Senate Energy Committee. We expect in April, could be likely targets are April 13th or April 21st. And so, in advance of that hearing, if you'd like to participate in the process, greatly appreciate if you could you can scan the QR code, or we'll put the link in the chat to a simple website where you can type in your name and zip code, and it will auto-populate. It will figure out which member of the Senate Energy Committee represents you and send a quick email to your representative in support of the bill. There's 17 members of the Senate Energy Committee. It's almost half of the California Senate. So odds are roughly half of you are being represented by a state senator, which is going to be voting on this bill in the next few weeks. So appreciate if you could take action. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't make mention of the Climate Center's upcoming California Climate Policy Summit. This is an event we do every year in Sacramento to bring together leading policymakers across California to assess the state of climate policy in California. I think confirmed speakers include Wade Crowfoot from the California Natural Resources Agency as a keynote, other key legislators, including Josh Becker, who's authoring the VGI bill I talked about, and others. And then we have an afternoon breakout session, which will talk in more details about specific items. There will be actually a session related to vehicle grid integration. So hope that you can all take the opportunity to register and attend if you'd like, and hope to see you in Sacramento. So with that, I will turn it over to our next speaker to kind of kick off the conversation, which will be Peter Chen from the CEC. So Peter, appreciate if you could go ahead and share screen and get going.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Peter Chen. I'm the supervisor of the Transportation Unit in CC's Research and Development Division. So what my team does, we oversee a portfolio of innovation projects related to integrating EVs with the grid, all funded under the EPIC program, which I'll speak a little bit more about in a second. Today, I plan to give a brief background on the potential that we see in bidirectional charging, and also why we're supporting the Bridge project with Nuvve, which is a core focus of today's webinar. So starting with this slide, as you can see, California's on-road zero-emission vehicle population it's over 2 million today. It's growing. A large majority of these vehicles are battery electric EVs. These EVs will continue to connect to California's grid, which is constrained at certain times and locations. What we're seeing is, if this is unmanaged, we face risk of EV adoption, increasing costs of upgrading or operating the grid. Vehicle grid integration is essentially any method of altering the time, charging level, or location at which these EVs charge, as well as discharge in a manner that optimizes their interaction with the grid and provides net benefits to ratepayers. Ideally, VGI, enabled through a combination of technology and policy, allows us to manage how EVs interact with the grid to keep our system affordable, put downward pressure on utility rates, main momentum on EV adoption, and help us achieve our climate goals. Bidirectional charging, sometimes we call it SpeedX or vehicle to everything. It's kind of like a subset of VGI technology. It involves discharging power from EV batteries to support loads, buildings, or the grid when needed. We see huge potential value to the grid. I think there's a well-understood sense of scale across several recent studies. Kurt, also gave a great example there, kind of comparing this to power plants, but really distributed on these mobile assets. This is one example from demand flexibility modeling done for SB 100 in 2024. which found that Vita-X will become the largest demand flex resource for reducing electricity peak demand. You can see how it compares to the potential of these other resources and how it's um, has a pretty outsized impact if we can scale it. Bidirectional charging also benefits EV drivers. So it's not just, helping the grid. It can also open up new valuable use cases for EVs beyond just transportation. So it enables EV drivers to export energy from their EV to power their home. We call this vehicle to home. That can enable backup power use cases, but also help lower energy bills. Um, it can be used to power individual appliances. We call this vehicle to load. And it can also be used to potentially earn money in exchange for sending energy to the grid when it's valuable to do so. And we call this vehicle to grid. All right, so this is the bidirectional charging white paper that Kurt mentioned. We recently published this. It essentially includes an analysis done by CC staff in partnership with the National Lab of the Rockies to look at the potential of bidirectional charging to reduce peak loads during um, peak hours through vehicle to home operation. And this is assuming all EVs were bidirectional capable by 2030. So it's this kind of upper bound case. The study considers these two scenarios. So first is a grid disconnected scenario in which the home and vehicle are not connected to the grid during this discharge session, and the EV is the only power source for the home. In the second scenario, the EV and home are connected to the grid during this discharge session, and both the EV and the grid are working together to supply what the home needs. In both scenarios, we're assuming the EV sends power to the home without exporting to the grid. And what the results show is that large numbers of EVs would be able to participate at least once a week for both scenarios, meaning they have the availability, they have enough energy capacity to do this kind of discharge. As a result, what we see is drivers would save on average around $260 and $320 respectively on their home energy bill for the summer months. And this is based on kind of today's TOU rates. The grid would also see a maximum 4.1 gigawatt and 5 gigawatt peak load reduction. And this is significant. It's around 10% of kind of residential peak load. And this means also that bidirectional EVs can be very effective backup power resources for most homes. So in summary, we see Vita H as a massive, yet to be tapped opportunity for California with potential benefits for both EV drivers as well as the grid. Now, despite the potential value of bidirectional charging, we still see critical barriers on our path to scale. Products are still emerging. Customers are still unclear about required equipment, process, costs associated with deploying bidirectional charging systems. Utility interconnection processes are still adapting to these products as they first enter the market. And lastly, we lack clear and generally available price signals, whether it's through utility programs or rates that compensate customers for bidirectional charging behavior that benefits the grid. We have some today, but they can be hard to access or only available through certain limited pilots. Thankfully, UC has many projects and initiatives across our different divisions to support advancement of bidirectional charging and load flexibility generally in California. We're trying to use all the tools in our toolbox, which include funding programs, our technical and modeling expertise, as well as regulatory authority where it exists. EPIC is one of our key funding programs that we use to support technology advancement. So it's a program really designed to foster innovation and tackle problems in the way of achieving our clean energy goals. So what we did was we used EPIC funding to put out a grant solicitation called GFO 24302, enabling electric vehicles as distributed energy resources. We put that out in October 2024. It included a funding group that sought projects to help reduce the cost of VDAX technology. We ended up selecting the Nuvi Bridge project as one of the awardees. I'll let Annabella speak to the project in more detail, but we're particularly excited about this project's potential to address some challenges we see with deploying VDAX systems for customers that also have solar and storage. All the barriers I mentioned just now get a little bit more complex when you layer in these other resources and also plan for grid exports. But the value potential also increases. So, that's why we're looking forward to progress on this effort. So with that, yeah, thank you for your time. I'll turn back to Kurt to move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Peter. So, yes, as Peter said, one of the projects funded by the CEC was the EPIC project. So, without further ado, turn it over to Annabella.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. Thanks for kicking us off, Peter, and thank you to the Climate Center for hosting today's webinar. So I'm here to introduce the Bridge project and tell you more about it. I'm going to go ahead and share our slides. Okay. Well, here we go. Yeah, so the Bridge project, as Peter shared, this is NUVI's CEC, California Energy Commission funded project. And the goal of this project is to turn 5 single-family residential homes in California into a microgrid. And how we're doing that is through vehicle to home. So we are unlocking the energy storage potential of an electric vehicle and enabling these homeowners' electric vehicles to provide backup power to their home. So just briefly, a little bit about NUVI, who we are and what we do. So NUVI is a provider of intelligent electrification services. We've been around for about 15 years, providing electric vehicle charging, vehicle to grid, and battery energy storage services and software to school districts, light duty fleets, commercial fleets, and commercial customers. And now we're bringing these capabilities to residential customers in California as well. Our goals are to support grid modernization, enable intelligent electrification through vehicle to grid and battery infrastructure, lowering electric vehicle ownership costs through energy services, ensuring customer mobility needs are always met, and protecting our customers' battery health during grid services. So I saw some questions in the chat about what is bidirectional charging, how does it work? So just to back up briefly, I wanted to include this slide to kind of provide an overview of how any vehicle to home or vehicle to grid or microgrid system works. So to do bidirectional charging or vehicle to home, you need 3 essential components. You need a bidirectionally enabled electric vehicle. That means an electric vehicle that's capable of being charged like any vehicle, but electric vehicle, but also that can push power back to a building, to a grid, or to a home. So something that's capable of two-way power transfer. That's what bidirectional means. You also need a bidirectional electric vehicle charger. Most electric vehicle chargers charge electric vehicles. A bidirectional charger also is capable of taking the power stored on board the electric vehicle and discharging that to a building or to a grid or to a microgrid. And then what sits on top of this system is a software platform. So in order for all of these pieces to come together and be interoperable and talk to each other and work, you need a software optimization platform. Sometimes it's called a controller or a software control platform. So this is the Fermata Energy platform that you see here sitting on top of the system. Fermata Energy is a NUVI company, and we are NUVI's software optimization provider for this project and many other projects. And so this is the intelligence part of the system that enables the bidirectional charger and electric vehicle to work together to provide grid services, to do backup power, and to ensure that you're always charging off peak and discharging on peak to save money on your electric bills. Okay, so getting into Bridge in more detail. So Bridge is actually an acronym. It stands for Bidirectional Residential Integration for Dispatchable Grid Energy. So as I mentioned earlier, the goal of this project is to essentially make the home a microgrid and make it easier for homeowners to turn their EVs into a backup power source. How are we doing that? We're doing that through a new device that we're designing and developing with our microgrid implementation partner, New Sun Road. This device is called the EMK. As you see there on that graphic, the EMK is a physical device. So it's actually a piece of hardware that we're going to be deploying at these 5 residential homes. And it is going to enable the interoperability and connectivity of the system. So it's going to bring together a customer's solar panels, if they have them, and their backup battery, if they have one, with the electric vehicle and bidirectional charger to create a fully integrated microgrid that's capable of providing backup power to the home, but also participating in grid services when the grid is stressed. So how is Bridge changing the way we use energy at home in California? So there are a couple key ways Bridge is transformative. The first way is that we're obviously doing vehicle to home here. We're using your EV to provide backup power during blackouts or public safety power shutoffs. When we think of backup power, I think we often think of diesel gensets, which aren't very clean. This is a way to use that electric vehicle that you already have to provide backup power to your home and to support clean and affordable backup power. You can also lower your energy bills with this system. As I mentioned earlier, the Fermata Energy Optimization Platform sits on top of that system, and 24/7 it's monitoring your energy use and ensuring that systems are operating in a way that is saving you money. So you're using energy when it's cheapest, and you're also having the opportunity to discharge to the grid when the grid is stressed, and you can get paid for doing so. And this EMK and project is designed to be plug and play. So it's designed to work with different EVs, different chargers, different home solar systems, and home batteries to prevent what's often called vendor lock-in in the industry, so that you don't become dependent on one vendor for the full system or suite of solutions. So if a customer has an EV and just a solar system, the EMK can be deployed and work at their home. Similarly, if a customer just has a backup battery and an EV, we can also deploy the EMK. So it's meant to preserve optionality for customers and meet them where they are. And as I mentioned earlier, you can discharge power back to the grid when the grid is stressed during emergency demand response events like ELRP, the Emergency Load Reduction Program, for example. So you can help out your community, prevent local outages, reduce the need for expensive new power plants and peaker plants, and also help support the distribution system. So how is Bridge different from similar solutions? So I think there were some questions in the chat about there's other solutions out there. How's this different? So affordability was one of our key priorities. So the EMK itself is targeted at a price of $800 to $1,000 once it's in full production at scale. The other way this is different is that we're, again, supporting consumer choice and optionality. So this system is designed to be plug and play and work with a variety of EVs, chargers, solar systems, and battery solutions. So we're meeting customers where they are, and that also helps support affordability. So if you have a solar PV system or a battery or both, you don't have to replace them just because you're going to be choosing the EMK. So meeting customers where they are is another way we can prevent having them to buy a full new system. So the EMK and this entire system is also being designed and certified in a way that avoids expensive infrastructure upgrades from the utility. So easy, safe setup is another goal here. And as I mentioned, we also have that smart energy assistant or optimization platform sitting on top of the system. So at all times, no matter what you're doing, this system's ensuring that your energy is being used optimally so that you're saving money on your electric bills, and also maximizing opportunities to provide energy back to the grid when it's needed most. So a little bit more about the pilot program itself, which Peter introduced earlier. So this was awarded to Nuvve Holding Corporation, or Nuvve, back in May of 2025, so last year. This is a 2-year pilot program. It runs until 2027. Our project partners include Fermata Energy, New Sun Road, Kia North America, UC Davis, UC Irvine, and the Climate Center. Fermata Energy is the software optimization platform. New Sun Road is our microgrid controller and microgrid technology partner. They're designing and developing the EMK in coordination with Nuvve and Fermata. Kia North America is our automaker partner. We are working with them very closely, and they are providing supporting us on customer recruitment. We're going to be using their electric vehicles for this project. UC Davis and UC Irvine are supporting lab testing of the EMKs and other aspects of the system. And the Climate Center, who's hosting today's webinar, is supporting us on customer recruitment, marketing, education, and outreach. And the California Energy Commission is funding this project under Agreement EPC 25020, enabling electric vehicles as DERs. And what's really exciting is that today our website is launching. So there should be a link in the chat, or it will be posted soon. So you can go to bridge.nuvve.com, click on that, and get updates and educational materials. You can sign up to learn more, sign up to participate in surveys, express interest in signing up to participate in the current pilot or future pilot, and sign up to learn more. So would love if everyone who's interested could sign up. All you have to do is add your name, your email address, and select what you're interested in. So, yeah, that is it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Annabella.
Thank you.
So our next speaker will be another project participant, Alex from Kia North America. Alex, take it away.
So thanks everyone for being here today. Yeah, I think Peter and Annabelle have started us off really well. And let me tell you a little bit about what Kia is doing in this space. So one of the things that we think a lot about here in the US is understanding the suite of features that really help us capture new customers. As everybody's probably heard, market situation the last year or two has been an interesting change, and it's been a little bit different than other markets outside of the US. But one of the things that we are seeing in the last 18, 24 months is we've really been doubling down on some of the uh, what had been challenges previously and working on those things to help better customer experience. So we look a lot at different survey tools. We also do a lot of customer testimonials, et cetera. And one source of data we use is from Ipsos that does a new vehicle consideration survey. They ask a lot of questions. One of the things we look a lot about is like what are their top rejection reasons? And obviously, when you're buying a new vehicle, uh, you know, the financing aspect of it is generally your biggest thing, and as customers are making decisions between products and what fits their budget. But one of the things that we have seen is a few years ago, range and place of the charge were one of the top rejection reasons. And while we haven't eliminated those concerns, we've definitely done a lot of steps through a lot of investments to help improve that experience for customers. And it's becoming less of a factor that customers are seeing as they choose the vehicle they're looking for. One thing that we also look a lot at, there's a great 501(c)(3) called EVs for All America, does a lot of political lensed polling on customers' attitudes. And what we started to see is they've been doing a survey now for a few years. Some of the polarization has been starting to ameliorate. That's still there for certain questions. But one of the things that we see improvement on is new technology, and that's appealing to customers. And so we really think that um, bidirectional charging is kind of one of those opportunities to showcase some of the other benefits of going EV. So, as Peter laid out earlier in his slides, Kia, we've had a lot of good experience with vehicle to load. So, we've had really great, compelling stories now for about 4 years as we've had vehicles with that capability in the market. And a lot of them has been hurricanes, winter storms, grid outages, etc. Keeping those one small devices powered on and available, customers have really found a great benefit from, and it's something that we want to help extend and give even more ability to use customers' vehicles. So what we've been doing is that since last year, we started an order process with Wallbox, and they make a bidirectional charger device called the Quasar 2. And so we've now started to get this into service. So we started pre-order process last spring. We moved to a full order process in October. And we've also been looking at different programs to kind of get involved. The cover photo that you saw when you registered today was taken by our great friends at UC Irvine's Advanced Power Energy Program, who will also be involved in this project. They have a separate project, Menifee, California, that's been a really helpful for us of learning, getting interconnection started and getting this to real customers' hands. So that's been a invaluable resource that now we're going to extend on with more programs like Bridge. So we're constantly, right now we're in this part where we're now in this permission to operate, where customers can, they've got it installed, they've gotten applications done. Now they're finally being able to actually use their system. So we're really excited about that and getting more of those online this spring. So we're constantly looking at different state, utility, and other energy provider programs to increase uptake. one of the great things about Bridge that Annabella touched on is that this is an opportunity to deploy to real customers and also optimize with multiple devices within a home, thinking about grid export with our project partner, New Sun Road. So Kia understands that it's still early days for Vehicle to Everything. We're used to launching products and them just being available, but we know that it's a process that we're actively trying to be involved with to really help customers through that experience. And so we have the program. As put in the chat, you can go to our website to see more about our Vehicle to Home program um, and about things that we're doing there. So finally, one of the things I really like to think about is as we start to scale kind of grid Vehicle to Everything projects, one of the things that we're looking at is areas in the country that have an ease of install because they're newer homes or they have other great supporting factors like electric vehicle heating, et cetera. But we also have areas where there's a lot of supportive incentives and other rate structures. So this bridge project firmly falls here in California. And a lot of areas that we're looking to do as part of this project is really explain and show in all kinds of home types uh, projects being installed. But one of those things that we look forward to is seeing some of the learnings that we're doing in these areas that may be a little bit harder to install. That helps us get programs in place in all places across the U.S. And so with that, I'll turn it over.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. Our next and final speaker before we go to Q&A is Linda Kamushian from Grid Alternatives. When you think about building out the grid for the future, it needs to be a policy priority to build that distributed energy future first in communities that typically suffer the most from air pollution and power outages. This has been the bread and butter of grid alternatives for a long time, sort of leading the charge in fully utilizing distributed clean energy to support disadvantaged communities, low-income communities across California. So I'm excited to turn it over to Linda.
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that nod to our work. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Linda Kamushian, and I'm based here in California in Los Angeles, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I, along with you, have been learning about this technology over the last several months, so really appreciate the ability to share not just about our work, but what this potential technology could work for communities that we serve, but also some of the you know, considerations we need to have from a policy perspective on how this can actually work for folks. So Grid Alternatives envisions a rapid, equitable transition to a world powered by renewable energy that benefits everyone. We are the country's largest nonprofit organization that builds community-powered solutions to advance economic and environmental justice through renewable energy. We've been doing this over the last 2 decades, and we've installed over 107 megawatts of solar, served over 36,000 families, have helped with 34,000 hands-on training opportunities, and had lifetime savings of over $160 million. So we work in a number of states. We've also worked internationally and in tribal communities. And a lot of our work is in California because of the opportunities here. And we're excited to see how this continues in the electric vehicle and zero emission vehicle space. So in starting around 2017 is when we started to pair our longstanding work in solar PV with increased access to electric vehicles. And we developed an approach to clean mobility and both for income qualified families, multifamily housing owners, and other community facilities to help to unlock these benefits as well. So we prioritize capacity building and wealth building opportunities in the same way that we do with solar. We want to maximize savings for transitioning off of fossil fuels. Our cars are, big users, as we see now, of fossil fuels and really challenging our communities. And when we pair that with solar, we unlock even more savings. And mobility justice is an important pillar for our work. We know that not everyone can rely on cars or can afford cars, but we want to advance opportunities to move people and not just cars. In 2015 alone, we served over 8,000 households through our programming in clean mobility. And some of that programming is clean mobility, marketing, education, outreach, which is an important component of actually deploying, the benefits to folks in underserved communities. We are implementers of EV and EVSC incentive programs. We have a high importance on affordable public charging. Not everyone has access to be able to charge at home, and I'll speak more about that. We also have had shared and micromobility programs and are installers of EVSC in the same way we are installers of solar. And we also do equity consulting for a lot of the programs that we have. So I want to take us back to an important policy framework that was established 10 years ago or so now, the Clean Energy and Pollution Reduction Act of 2015. It did two things. This law required state agencies like the CEC and CARB to study why low-income and disadvantaged communities have limited access to clean energy and transportation options. This was very critical because if we're going to bring everyone on board and extend benefits to folks that need them most and communities that need them most, we need to understand how and why we have what are the barriers and how we can prevent not allowing for that to be opportunities for them. So at the time there was not enough information, and both the CEC and CARB developed reports, SB 350 reports. And the CEC report focused on structural barriers that limited access to clean energy, the policy and program barriers at the state level, and also barriers for local and small businesses. But there was no mention of electric vehicle supply equipment at the time. And that's what we've been learning through our programs is what really is the challenge for folks to affordable charging. And at CARB, there was other priority recommendations for the actual clean transportation access and mobility options. And this really included really understanding community needs. Not every community has the same transportation needs per se. A real emphasis on increased outreach and awareness, just that's a key component. And we can't just keep looking at folks as customers, but as folks that we want to bring on to this advancement in technology. Increase in funding for folks, incentives, grant opportunities, and also workforce development opportunities. So another key area which took that a step further was actually establishing that within these programs and these funding sources, what are the sort of designations of funding that needs to go towards disadvantaged communities. So I'll just point out that AB 126 was what was established that at least 50%. Oh, sorry. Go back. There we go. That established at the California Energy Commission that must go towards directly benefiting disadvantaged and low-income communities. So that said, places are not necessarily people. So we may see investment in designation, census tracts, but it doesn't actually always align with investing in people. And we just know that there are barriers to equitable EV charging. Housing constraints, not everyone has not everyone is a homeowner. If we're talking about bidirectional charging, are the benefits only going to benefit homeowners? Taking that into consideration. And older housing stock. There are a number of upgrades that need to be made in addition to the technology and that will add to costs. And someone mentioned, I think, in the chat that just having the right contractor understand and know how to do that work. And as I mentioned, awareness and trust gaps. There's been situations where people take advantage of folks when it comes to deploying this energy, or this infrastructure and technology. And so just wanted to share considerations that need to be made. Don't have all kinds of solutions, but something to really think about when we want to deploy. Um, Cost of equipment and install. Like, what is the actual return of investment on that people need to consider and be communicated? Is this going to be something that is going to work for them and their budgets? And how are they getting upfront financial support? To get, whether it's incentives or otherwise. How does this stack with solar? Getting that type of installation all at once would really maybe even decrease the costs. And then keeping technology practical for people's lives. Uh, this is a transition and acknowledging that people don't have a lot of slack in their lives to really adapt necessarily. So how do we make sure that we are considering how this fits into people's day to day? And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I'd like it if all our panelists could come back on video and we'll just start going through some Q&A. I've chosen a couple of questions in no particular order. Thank you for people who are putting stuff into the Q&A. I'm struck by a lot of things, including one, just the relative rarity of what's happening currently in vehicle to home in California. I'm curious, Peter, perhaps for Annabella, like how many V to H installations do we currently have in California? If we've got almost over 2 million EVs, how many of those are currently, is that, I don't know, the CEC tracks that data? Annabella, do you know?
Yeah, I don't have a number that we're tracking, but it's not a lot. This is still, I think we all understand it's still very early days for this technology. I think we're very motivated to try and ramp up quickly. I think there's a lot of potential to be had with doing that, but I think products are just now entering the market. OEMs are starting to support this, and um, yeah, we're kind of seeing this inflection point, I think, especially with residential bidirectional charging.
Annabella, do you have something to add? Or
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on the segment though. Nuvi has been developing electric school bus projects across the state for over 10 years. So we have several school sites with bidirectional chargers, many more that are interconnecting their chargers to become bidirectional or swapping out chargers to soon participate in grid services. I think I mentioned in the chat, Nuvi is also working on a project with 2 school sites in California to bring them bidirectional charging and a stationary storage. Similar idea, creating a microgrid at a school site to serve as a community resilience hub. So the list is growing. Fermata Energy had a couple deployments and pilots with utilities in California. So we've worked with SDG&E and PG&E on V2G pilots. So we have some installations there. We have a site in Northern California, 5 bidirectional chargers at Nissan's facility in Santa Clara. So the number is growing, but in the residential space, this is very new. So there haven't really been many. So this pilot is really quite innovative.
Thank you. And Alex, maybe this is an unfair question. Are the Europeans or others ahead of us in this regard? Do we know? Maybe Annabelle or Peter, like,
Yeah, I mean, I think I think on some grid services items, I think there are some parts that definitely are further ahead. I think in terms of backup home, I think it's still probably on par with where we're at the moment.
So we're all just barely scratching. So I have a bidirectional EV. I don't yet have a vehicle to home. I do have a vehicle to load function. So I live in a place where the power goes out all the time, and have actually run an extension cord from my car to connect my fridge and my router and a couple lights. Um, but I haven't yet purchased that product that'll seamlessly integrate. And like I'm a full-on nerd, so I guess that I don't have that product yet indicates that like it's just barely starting. Um, so more questions in the chat in no particular order. Well, one of the questions was, please explain the greenhouse gas emissions benefits associated with this whole model. And I can just tackle that one straight ahead. The way we handle the grid in California is, virtually every day that, the sun goes down and then we fire up lots of typically natural gas plants, which tend to be typically located in disadvantaged communities across California, not surprisingly. So there's a big benefit associated with reducing the need to sort of use those peaker plants. In fact, as is noted in the CEC study, there's huge amounts of potential energy storage and also power capacity. And so if we're fully tapping into that, that will reduce the need for using those power plants that are using fossil fuel. So that's one of the reasons we got into this at the Climate Center. There's a big pollution prevention benefit available. And then actually scaling across nationwide, there are similar numbers I've seen that look at the overall US fleet, and then comparing that to the capacity of natural gas generation we have currently in the United States. Um, it's coming up on equaling the total installed capacity of natural gas power plants in the US. So this issue is not just an opportunity for California, but it's for the whole country. And so the dream is to get to a world where we're using that flexible, currently untapped energy storage in EVs to reduce the need for natural gas. Um, I'm going to go down by speakers. Peter, like, can you give us a little bit of a preview of what's coming up next potentially from the CEC regarding vehicle to grid integration? And are there more exciting things coming out, or what can we expect going forward coming from the CEC? That new white paper was fantastic. Um, any highlights of what's ahead from the CEC in this regard?
Yeah, so speaking of the white paper, we do have our third AB 2127. This is a charging infrastructure assessment that we're mandated to produce every 2 years. We're planning to publish it later this year, and in it will include kind of an update and more details on that VDH analysis that was included in the white paper. So that's something to look out for later this year. Um, we have updates coming up for our B2G equipment list, and this is a resource that CC manages that is intended to kind of help streamline interconnection of these systems. We plan to make some improvements as some new standards are introduced for B2G systems. I think obviously for Epic, we have the new grid project, but we have other projects that we funded out of that solicitation. We're looking to make progress on everything that we're supporting and hoping to be able to report out interim findings along the way. Looking ahead on Epic, we also have our Epic 5 investment plan in the works this year. That will essentially lay out the next 5 years of Epic funding. So it'll include kind of R&D topics, top of mind, that we're interested in, looking into through 2030. We're going to have workshops, later this year, opportunities for the public to engage with that investment plan. And lastly, I do want to mention Redwoods. So this is it's not EPIC funded, but it's another big funding program that the CC supports that relates to VGI. We have 10 grants out. Some of them are supporting additional deployments of bidirectional chargers. So we're hoping to kind of increase that number, especially for residential VDACs.
Thank you. Annabella, like, what's the vision for scaling up? So if this project specifically is five, to get this going, I don't know if you could project into the future, like, how do we get to a world where every single EV owner is using that asset in their driveway to keep the lights on at their house and lower their bills? Like, what does it look like from your perspective trying to make this happen? And even like 2030, actually, this is my question for all of you. Like, I don't know what's potentially doable if we have very small number of these installations now here in 2026. Like, what's do of those 2.5 million EVs today in California? Like, how many of them could maybe be in vehicle to home by 2030? I don't know. And that's a question for all of you, really.
I don't want to forecast, right, but we'd love to see hundreds, thousands deployed throughout the state of California and across the country. And that's exactly what Bridge is designed to do. It's a small scale pilot. We're only deploying this system at 5 single family residential homes throughout the state, but it's designed to collect learnings about the technical challenges, the challenges around interconnection, installation, certification, customer education, recruitment, outreach, all of these key pieces that are going to affect our ability to scale. So I mentioned affordability. The EMK itself, the target price is around $800 to $1,000 at scale. We are now working with Kia. Our goal is to work with lots of automakers that are bringing bidirectionally enabled vehicles to the market as long as they use open standards. So hopefully there will be options for customers that have different EVs. As more automakers bring bidirectionally enabled EVs to market, that also will support the scalability of V2H. We're working with testing several bidirectional chargers. We're likely to work with Wallbox first and then possibly some others. So, we really need more bidirectional chargers, more automakers bringing forth bidirectionally enabled vehicles so we can test with them. Kia is leading the way on this. Alex can probably share more about some of the V2H pilots and testing they've done. And we see a lot of alignment on the key priorities around Bridge. So we're working with Kia. I'm very excited to do so. But I think like the vision is more EVs, more chargers, more optionality for customers. And as these systems scale and are produced at volume, prices will come down. There was a comment about like getting installers educated. That's another piece of this that we need to work on. It's working with our utility partners, our AHJs, those local permitting authorities, installers, customers, every part of that ecosystem. So it's going to take a lot of work and some time, but that's the vision. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Alex, so Kia is a leader in this space. How does Kia compare to some of the automakers in prioritizing this? Like how is this going to play out? Are we going to get to the world where everyone's doing this right now, or just compare yourself to your colleagues in the auto industry and also think about what's going to happen next?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, look, I think a lot of our friends are, thinking kind of a similar way. We really want to, at the end of the day, we have a customer that's purchasing one of our vehicles. We want to make sure that they get the most value out of that. And so we're really focused on trying to make sure that there are programs in place that, provide a stable rate structure that makes it attractive to, want to participate. And then also make sure that the process to like get it installed is also easy, which, admittedly it's not at the moment, but that's something that, I think with Bridge and, I would give a shout out to our project in Menifee with UCI APEP, doing a lot of work to help us learning that process and getting utility up to speed and comfortable with devices. But we expect that will soon, change. So, where we're kind of seeing is, right now it's one of our, advantages, things we're thinking about. We know soon that, more players will come. So where we kind of see of like where's Kia's advantage, is really just trying to get into more programs early, really demonstrating the experience to customers, and then ultimately having customers come back and, wanting more of it. So I think that's our best shot to, where we kind of see by 2030 of getting more installs. And, like I said, comes down to cheaper devices that works with this. It gets an easier, transparent process to install. And then it's also, an easy money savings that customers can understand and factor in. Hopefully for us, like we want to sell more vehicles with plugs. So we really hope that this is we can get it to where we move it all the way forward to when it becomes that purchase decision time that a customer can choose to go EV because here's this great thing that they can do.
So the dream is that when they're buying the vehicle, they would buy a package at some level, that there's a vehicle to home system that they would incorporate right out of the gate and go
Yeah, that's
home.
right.
Yeah.
We know that most of the time that first 2 weeks of a customer's experience with a new EV is usually sometimes the ones where they don't already have charging at home is the one that they're already most nervous about or what they spend a lot of time in that decision process. So anything we can do to help ensure that customers have that best first 2 week experience, and then they can go back to doing what they enjoy, which is, they enjoy the vehicle.
So this all sounds great. It sounds really hard to do for anyone, much less someone that's potentially not a high income consumer in California. I don't know. Lindy, you sort of covered this already, but maybe recap some of the key barriers to making this really work first and best in the communities that suffer the most from power outages. Like how can state policy? I mean, we're trying to talk about these issues now, but you know, it's great to have a couple hundred people on a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, but how do we get to a point where everybody is like, oh yeah, okay, I'm doing this. I'm buying an EV and I understand. Like, just repeat some of the challenges for the, low income communities in particular, and then what policies can help overcome those challenges.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, just starting already buying an EV itself is there's a lot of barriers to that. A lot of folks rely on the incentive or the rebates to really make it make sense or financing. So really, we're not seeing as much investment in that, and obviously in budget cycles that are tighter, it's not the key component, although there is going to be a one-time additional investment this year. How many people that reaches and who, because there's no equity provisions, so we're not identifying any kind of low-income structure there. And then the other is that a lot of folks that we serve, they turn to the used market. So they're not looking at, the latest and greatest. It's what is going to serve their day to day and also meet their financial needs and constraints. And so we do have to acknowledge that this may not actually reach folks in the same timeline. But then how do we shift that or prevent that is to make sure that it's in the process, the considerations are in the process. And so, uh, I don't have, I have more questions than solutions, I would say at this point, but I'm happy to be involved and engaged in the process. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to the final call. So one of the bills we're working on is talked about SB 1282 is working towards creating additional authority for the California Energy Commission to create new requirements so that every EV is bidirectional, and that would actually follow on into the used car market as well. So everybody's buying not only an EV in the used market, but a bidirectional EV so they can take advantage of this. So in the remaining moments, please click on the Take Action link to send a note to your legislator in support of SB 1282. Final program note, we will send a follow-up email, which will have a link to all of the slides and presentations and bio information for the speakers today. So I think we're at a good space to wrap. So thank you all for your presentations this morning, and thanks to all of our participants. Grateful you could be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.